I never believed in coincidences. In my world of million-dollar algorithms, they are just clumsily disguised lies. When Julian's second phone buzzed at 2 in the morning, the screen illuminated a name buried in my past: Elara, my cousin, the woman who covets my life. Julian silenced it faster than an innocent man's heartbeat, thinking the game had begun. He forgets that I do not just play, I design the board. My name is Lavinia Greystone. At 38 years old, I have constructed a life that functions with the silent, terrifying efficiency of the server rooms I oversee at Aegis Prime Solutions. As the Senior Risk Management Director for one of the world's leading security technology firms, my existence is defined by the anticipation of threats. I do not deal in hope. I do not traffic in optimism. I calculate the probability of failure, and then I build walls thick enough to withstand the blast. My home reflects this pathology. It is a penthouse suspended 40 stories above the grid of Chicago. A glass sanctuary where the air always smells of white tea and ozone. There are no keys here. The elevator recognizes the unique topography of my retina. The lights adjust to the cortisol levels in my voice. It is a fortress of solitude and chrome, a place where nothing enters without permission and nothing leaves without a digital footprint, or so I believed until last night. For 5 years, Julian Thorne has been the soft counterweight to my sharp edges. He is a celebrated architect, a man who designs libraries that look like cathedrals and hospitals that feel like gardens. The public sees a genius with a humble, self-effacing smile. I saw a man who grounded me. While I spent my days analyzing corporate espionage and potential data breaches, Julian spent his worrying about the way light hit a limestone facade at sunset. He was my safe harbor. He was the one variable in my life I had ceased to audit. That was my first mistake. In risk management, complacency is not just a flaw, it is a death sentence. The anomaly appeared 3 days ago. Julian returned home with a sleek, matte black smartphone that I had never seen before. It was not his usual device, the one with the cracked screen protector he refused to change because he claimed it gave the object character. This new device was pristine. When I asked him about it, his heart rate did not spike. His pupils did not dilate. He simply kissed my forehead and told me it was a secure line for the new international airport bid in Dubai. He said the clients were paranoid about intellectual property theft. It was a plausible lie. It was exactly the kind of lie I would have advised a client to use if they were trying to hide a merger, because it made sense in our world. I let it slide. I filed it away as a low-level variance, not a threat. Last night, the variance became a breach. Insomnia is the price I pay for my intellect. My brain refuses to power down. It cycles through the day's data, looking for patterns I might have missed. It was 2 in the morning. The city outside was a blur of sodium vapor and rain against the floor-to-ceiling glass. The bedroom was submerged in a heavy, expensive silence. I lay perfectly still, listening to the rhythmic breathing of the man beside me. Julian sleeps like a child, or perhaps like the innocent man he pretends to be. His chest rose and fell with a steady cadence that used to comfort me. Now, in retrospect, it seems like a metronome counting down to an explosion. The phone was plugged into an outlet behind the velvet armchair in the corner of the room. He had thought I wouldn't notice. He had tucked it behind a stack of Architectural Digest magazines. But light, like truth, has a way of escaping confinement. The screen lit up. It was a silent notification, no vibration, just a sudden, spectral blue glow that cut through the darkness. From my position on the bed, I had a direct line of sight. The font was small, but my vision is perfect. I saw the name clearly. E. Vance. My heart did not race. It stopped. It simply ceased to function for a terrible second, as if my internal operating system had crashed. E. Vance. Elara Vance. I had not spoken that name in 10 years. I had scrubbed it from my holiday card lists, blocked it on every social media platform, and buried it beneath a decade of success. Elara was my cousin, but that word implies a familial warmth that never existed between us. She was my shadow. She was the parasitic vine that grew around the oak tree. choking it to reach the sun. Since we were children, Elara had coveted everything that was mine. When I was 6, she stole my porcelain doll and cut its hair because she could not bear that it was prettier than hers. When I was 16, she bought the exact same prom dress I had spent months saving for, just to wear it to the dance before I could arrive. When I received a full scholarship to Stanford, she told our grandmother that I had cheated on the entrance exams. She did not want to be successful. She wanted to be Lavinia. I lay in the dark, my body rigid under the Egyptian cotton sheets. The name on the screen faded, but the after-image burned into my retina. Why was my husband, the man who claimed to love the fortress I had built, receiving messages at 2 a.m. from the one person I had explicitly banned from my life beside me? The rhythm of the bed shifted. Julian was awake. I did not move. I employed a breathing technique I use before board meetings. Shallow intake, slow release. I kept my eyes closed, leaving only a slit open through my lashes. I watched his shadow detach itself from the bed. He moved with a stealth that contradicted his clumsy, artistic persona. He crept toward the chair. I saw his hand snatch the phone. The glow illuminated his face for a fraction of a second. He did not look annoyed. He did not look like a man bothered by a work crisis. He looked terrified. He swiped the screen, read the message, and then his fingers flew across the glass. He was typing a response. Then, he held the power button down. He waited until the device went completely black before sliding it under the cushion of the armchair. He stood there for a moment, looking back at the bed, looking at me. I forced my body to remain limp. I forced my breathing to remain heavy and even. He was checking to see if the asset was secure. He was assessing the risk. After a long minute, he crept back into bed. He pulled the duvet up to his chin and turned away from me. But his breathing had changed. It was no longer the deep, slow rhythm of sleep. It was shallow, rapid, the adrenaline of the guilty. I did not sleep for the rest of the night. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, constructing a mental map of my life and marking the structural failures. If Elara was back, she was not here for money. She could get money anywhere. She was here for the one thing she had never been able to take from me: my stability, my status, my husband. Morning came with the gray, indifferent light of a Chicago autumn. I rose at 6. Routine is the armor I wear to face the world. I showered, the water scalding hot, scrubbing my skin as if I could wash away the proximity of the man sleeping in my bed. I dressed in my usual uniform, a tailored charcoal suit, silk blouse, heels sharp enough to puncture drywall. When I walked into the kitchen, the smart home system greeted me, adjusting the blinds to let in the maximum amount of natural light. I started the espresso machine. The grinder screamed, shattering the silence. I began to slice an avocado for toast, the knife moving with surgical precision. Julian walked in 10 minutes later. He looked haggard. There were dark circles under his eyes that no amount of charming dishevelment could hide. He wore his favorite navy sweater, the one I had bought him for our 2nd anniversary. It made him look soft, approachable, safe. "Good morning, darling," he said. His voice was rough. He walked over to kiss me. I did not flinch. I did not pull away. I let his lips touch my cheek. They felt dry. "Good morning," I replied. My voice was steady. It was the voice I used when firing an incompetent analyst. "You look tired." "The project?" He poured himself a cup of coffee, his hand trembling slightly as he held the carafe. "Yeah," he said, avoiding my eyes. "It is a nightmare. The structural integrity specs for the main terminal are all wrong. They need me to fly out." I paused, the knife hovering over the avocado. "Where's Seattle?" he said. He took a sip of coffee, using the mug to hide his mouth. "I have to meet the lead engineer. It is sudden, I know, but if we do not fix this today, we lose the bid." Seattle. Elara had moved to the Pacific Northwest 10 years ago. It was the last piece of intelligence I had gathered on her before I stopped caring. She had gone there to become an actress, or a model, or whatever fantasy she was chasing at the time. My husband was lying to me. He was not going to a meeting. He was going to her. A normal wife might have screamed. A normal wife might have thrown the coffee mug at the wall and demanded the truth. She might have cried and asked how he could do this after 5 years of devotion. But I am not a normal wife. I am Lavinia Greystone. I know that information is leverage, and you do not reveal your leverage until you are ready to destroy your opponent. If I confronted him now, he would deny it. He would invent a story. He would delete the messages. He would go underground. And I would be left with nothing but suspicion and a broken marriage. No, I needed proof. I needed the kind of evidence that stands up in a court of law and in the court of public opinion. That is terrible. Julian, I said, sliding the plate of avocado toast toward him, but you have to go. Your reputation is built on reliability. He looked at me, surprised by my easy acceptance. Relief washed over his face, making him look younger, more like the man I thought I married. You are amazing. Lavinia, he said, I do not deserve you. No, I thought, you certainly do not. He ate quickly, checking his watch every 2 minutes. The black phone was nowhere in sight. He had likely packed it in his luggage, buried deep beneath his cashmere sweaters. I helped him pack. I folded his shirts. I placed his toiletries in his leather kit. I played the role of the dutiful, supportive partner perfectly. I even put a note in his pocket, a small card that said, "Drive safely." It was a test. I wanted to see if he would feel guilt. He smiled when he read it, but the smile did not reach his eyes. It was a muscle spasm, nothing more. The car arrived at 8. It was a black sedan from a private service. He kissed me at the door. I will be back on Thursday, he promised. I watched him walk down the hallway to the elevator. He did not look back. He stood with his shoulders hunched, the posture of a man carrying a heavy load. The elevator doors slid shut, sealing him inside, cutting him off from my world. The moment the numbers above the elevator started to descend, the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. The performance was over. I walked to the kitchen island and picked up my phone. I did not call my assistant. I did not call the office. I unlocked a secure folder that I had created 3 years ago, a folder labeled simply "Emergency." Inside was a single contact number. It belonged to a private security firm that operated outside the jurisdiction of Aegis Prime. They were expensive, discreet, and morally flexible. They were the people you called when you needed to know the things the law did not allow you to know. I pressed the call button. It rang once. Greystone. A voice answered. Distorted. Male. My husband just left the building. I said. My voice was devoid of emotion. I was no longer a wife. I was a client. I was an architect of consequences. Target name is Julian Thorne. He claims to be heading to O'Hare for a flight to Seattle. I want to know where he really goes. I want audio. I want video. And I want a complete digital mirror of his communications. We can do that, the voice said. It will require the black box protocol if you want deep encryption breaking. That is level 4 pricing. I looked around my empty, beautiful, cold apartment. I looked at the spot where the second phone had glowed in the dark, signaling the end of my life as I knew it. Money is not a variable, I said. Initiate black box and find out everything you can on a woman named Elara Vance. She is currently using the alias E. Vance. I want to know where she lives, who she is sleeping with, and how long she has been planning this. Understood. We are live. I ended the call. I stood by the window, looking down at the city. Somewhere down there, in the maze of steel and concrete, my husband was speeding away from me. He thought he was escaping to a secret liaison. He thought he was clever. He thought he was free. He had no idea that he had just walked into a surveillance grid that would make the NSA look like amateurs. Elara wanted to be me fine. I would give her a lesson in what it actually means to be Lavinia Greystone. It does not mean wearing expensive clothes or living in a penthouse. It means seeing the world for what it is, a battlefield, and I never lose. The glass doors of Aegis Prime Solutions slid open with a whisper, admitting me into the climate-controlled sanctum of my professional life. My assistant, a bright young woman named Sarah, who still believed in the inherent goodness of humanity, greeted me with a venti Americano and a stack of compliance reports. I took them with a nod, my face a mask of serene authority. To the outside world, I was just Lavinia Greystone starting another Tuesday of mitigating corporate liabilities. But as I walked into my corner office and engaged the privacy frost on the glass walls, I was not thinking about our quarterly projections. I was thinking about the man I had kissed goodbye 40 minutes ago. I sat at my desk, a slab of black marble that cost more than most people's cars, and opened my laptop. I did not log into the Aegis mainframe. Using company resources to track a spouse was amateur hour. It left a digital paper trail that HR could flag, or worse, that the internal audit team, my own team, would eventually catch. Instead, I pulled a small, nondescript drive from my locked drawer. This was my skeleton key. It connected me to a private, encrypted server maintained by a collective of white-hat hackers I had quietly recruited over the years. They were my shadow network, brilliant kids who had tried to breach our systems and failed, whom I had hired on private retainers instead of sending to federal prison. They built tools for me that did not exist on the open market. The first step was location. Julian is a smart man, or at least, he thinks he is. He had disabled the location sharing on his phone and the GPS tracking on the Tesla's main interface before he even left the garage. He likely felt very clever watching the navigation screen go dark, but Julian is an architect, not a risk manager. He understands aesthetics and load-bearing walls. I understand redundancies. When we bought the Tesla Model S 2 years ago, I insisted on a premium insurance package that required a secondary, hardwired telematics chip for theft recovery. It runs on an independent battery and transmits location data directly to the insurer's cloud every 30 seconds. I am the primary policyholder. I have the admin login. I typed in the credentials. A map of Chicago and its sprawling suburbs materialized on my screen. I watched the blinking green dot that represented my husband. He was not heading northwest toward O'Hare International Airport. He was moving west, cruising down the I-88 corridor with the steady pace of a man who is not late for a flight. I zoomed in. The dot exited the highway and wound through the manicured streets of Oak Brook. It came to a stop not at a hotel, but at a residential complex. I cross-referenced the coordinates. The Obsidian Tower. It was a new development, aggressive and ultra-modern, marketed to the nouveau riche who wanted the prestige of city living without the grit. The dot remained stationary in the resident parking garage. So, he was not flying, he was nesting. I minimized the map and opened the financial analysis tools. This was my native language. People lie, but numbers are incapable of deceit. I pulled the raw data from our joint accounts, the credit cards, and the investment portfolios. To the untrained eye, our finances were impeccable. We saved 30% of our income. Our credit scores were perfect, and our spending was within normal parameters for our tax bracket. But I was not looking for macro trends. I was looking for microfractures. I wrote a script to isolate cash withdrawals and transactions under $500 over the last 24 months. The screen populated with thousands of lines, coffee shops, gas stations, ATMs in neighborhoods we never visited. Client dinners that were billed as cash withdrawals at bars. A pattern emerged. Every Friday, Julian would withdraw $300. Every Tuesday, another $200. Sometimes he would buy supplies at hardware stores that sold generic gift cards. I did the math in my head. $500 a week, plus irregular spikes, multiplied by 104 weeks, plus the bonus he claimed was smaller than expected last year, plus the consulting fees he said he paid to subcontractors that I could not verify. $200,000. It was not a fortune. It was not enough to buy a house in the Hamptons or a yacht, but it was enough to rent a luxury apartment at the Obsidian Tower for a year. It was enough to furnish it. It was enough to buy a wardrobe of high-end clothes and maintain a lifestyle for someone who had no income of her own. I felt a cold, metallic taste in my mouth. This was not impulsive spending. This was venture capital. Julian was funding a startup, and the product was his life without me. I opened a new tab and typed in the name I had seen on the phone screen, Elara Vance. My search returned nothing recent under that name, which was expected. Elara had always been a chameleon. I tried the variations my shadow network had flagged for me, based on facial recognition algorithms I ran against social media databases. Elena V. There she was. Her Instagram profile was public. A curated gallery of unearned luxury. The woman in the photos looked like a distorted mirror image of me. Same auburn hair, though hers was dyed a shade too red. Same style of dress, though hers fit a little less perfectly. Her bio described her as a virtual real estate broker and crypto enthusiast, which are modern synonyms for unemployed. I clicked through her recent posts. There were photos of her drinking champagne in a living room with floor-to-ceiling windows. I cross-referenced the view with the architectural rendering of the Obsidian Tower. It was a match. She was living in the apartment my husband was paying for, but it was the captions that made my blood run cold. Building the empire. She wrote under a photo of a laptop screen. Big things coming. Disruption is the only way forward. Disruption. That was a word Julian used constantly. I needed to hear them. I needed to know the texture of their betrayal. I could not tap the phone he was using. It was likely a burner with end-to-end encryption. But I had something better. Julian was a creature of habit. When he worked, he needed his specific ergonomic setup. He had taken his personal MacBook Pro with him, claiming he needed it for the airport lounge. That laptop had connected to our home Wi-Fi for 5 years. And because I am the one who configured our smart home network, I have root access to every device that has ever shaken hands with our router. I executed a remote command, a silent packet injection that I had developed for testing firewall permeability. It woke up the background processes on his MacBook. I bypassed the user login and installed a kernel-level keylogger and a remote microphone tap. The connection established. The audio feed crackled to life in my AirPods. I heard the hum of a high-end HVAC system, the clinking of glass. "It is perfect, Julian," a woman's voice said. It was Elara. Her voice had not changed. It still had that scratchy, desperate quality, like she was always trying to convince you of something. "The view is exactly like hers." "Better than hers," Julian's voice replied. "Because this is ours." I waited for the sounds of intimacy. I waited for the wet, sickening noises of an affair, but they did not come. Instead, I heard the click-clack of a keyboard. "Did you get the updated render?" Elara asked. Her tone shifted. The seduction was gone, replaced by a sharp, demanding business tone. "The buyer in Shenzhen is getting impatient. They want to see the physical perimeter specs." "I am uploading it now," Julian said. "Relax. Elara, the encryption takes time. These files are massive." "They better be accurate," she snapped. "If the sensor blind spots are wrong, we don't get the second half of the payment." My fingers hovered over my keyboard. Sensor blind spots. I accessed the screen mirroring function. I needed to see what he was uploading. A window popped up on my monitor, showing me a live view of Julian's desktop in that apartment 30 miles away. He was running AutoCAD, the architectural design software he used for his legitimate projects. But the blueprints on the screen were not for an airport in Seattle. They were not for a library or a hospital. I stared at the lines, the vectors, the red zones marking infrared sensors and pressure plates. I knew this layout. I knew every corridor, every server room, every ventilation shaft. It was the 30th floor of the Aegis Prime building, my floor. The file name was project_glass_house_level_30_security_override, DWG. I felt the air leave my lungs. I watched as Julian zoomed in on a specific section of the hallway, the corridor leading to the main server vault. He had marked a ventilation grate with a yellow note maintenance hatch. Override key code 4490. No biometric scanner here. My mind flashed back to the company Christmas party 3 months ago. I had brought Julian. He had been so charming, asking security guards about their shifts, joking about how complex the building must be. I remembered the time I forgot my badge and he waited with me in the lobby, intently studying the turnstiles. I remembered the lunches he brought me, where he would insist on walking me back to my office, his eyes scanning the ceiling cameras. He had not been being a supportive husband. He had been casing the joint. This was not just infidelity, this was corporate espionage. Julian and Elara were not just sleeping together, they were building a product to sell on the black market. And the product was the security infrastructure of my company. They were selling the keys to the castle that I had spent my entire career fortifying. The betrayal went deeper than flesh. He had weaponized his proximity to me. He had used my trust to dismantle the very thing that made me powerful. I watched the progress bar on his screen. Upload 45%. They were sending the schematics to a buyer in Shenzhen. If that file went through, Aegis Prime would be compromised. Our clients' governments, banks, defense contractors would be vulnerable. My career would be over. I would be investigated, perhaps prosecuted for negligence. Elara did not just want my life. She wanted to burn it to the ground and sell the ashes. I sat back in my chair, the silence of my office pressing against my eardrums. A normal woman would call the police. A normal woman would call the bank. But I was done being a normal woman. I was Lavinia Greystone, and I had just found the glitch in the system. I did not stop the upload. I did not shut down his computer. That would alert them. Instead, I opened a new terminal window. If they wanted to show off with code, I would show them what it could really do. I began to type, my fingers moving faster than they ever had before. I wasn't going to stop them outright. I was going to let their own greed speak for itself and make sure the proof came from their choices, not mine. But first, I needed to see exactly how much damage they were planning. I opened his email client and found the encrypted folder labeled Drafts. I tried the obvious keys. Little personal tells people swear they'd never use. It took 12 seconds. The password was my birthday. The arrogance. The folder opened. Inside was a timeline, not just a plan and inventory of intent. Phase 1 mapping. Complete. Phase 2. The harvest. Scheduled for next week. Phase 3. The exit. Their exit strategy was simple. Convert everything that could be converted, and disappear somewhere that would make a clean chase nearly impossible. They were going to leave me with the wreckage, the scandal, and the ache of it all while they started over in comfort, funded by my collapse. I glanced back at the live feed of Julian's screen again. Upload 60%. Almost there, Julian said, his voice tinny in my ear. We are going to be rich. Elara, finally free of her condescending shadow. I can't wait to see the look on her face when she gets fired. Elara laughed. Miss Perfect, escorted out by security. I closed my eyes for a brief second. I let the rage fill me, hot and absolute. Then I opened my eyes, and the rage was gone. All that was left was cold. Hard calculation. You want to see my face? I whispered to the empty room. Careful what you wish for. Cousin. I reached for my phone and dialed the number for my shadow network again. It was time to rewrite their code. Thursday evening arrived with the inevitability of a margin call. The elevator chimed at 7 o'clock sharp, announcing Julian's return from his fictitious trip to Seattle. I was waiting in the living room, seated in the Eames chair, holding a tablet I was not reading. I had staged the scene with the same meticulous care I applied to my corporate presentations. The lighting was dim. The ambient music soft a trap baited with domestic tranquility. When Julian walked in, he brought the smell of rain and deception with him. He looked weary, performing the role of the exhausted traveler with the dedication of a man auditioning for his life. He dropped his leather weekender bag by the door with a heavy thud, sighed, and rubbed his temples. God, I missed you, he said, the lie rolling off his tongue like oil. Welcome home, I replied, not standing up. How was the Pacific Northwest? Wet, gray, endless meetings, he said, walking over to kiss me. I allowed it. I let his lips touch mine, searching for the taste of another woman, but he was careful. He tasted only of mints and recycled airplane air. But I brought you something. He reached into his bag and pulled out a small, flat box wrapped in silver paper. My heart did not flutter. It calculated. Julian had never been good at gifts. for our anniversaries. I usually had to send him links to exactly what I wanted. Spontaneity was not his strong suit. Unless he was orchestrating a felony. I unwrapped the package slowly. Inside lay a silk scarf. I stared at it. It was a riot of colors: garish fuchsia, screaming teal, and gold chains printed in a chaotic pattern that assaulted the eyes. It was loud. It was tacky. It was exactly the kind of thing a woman who confuses price tags with class would wear. It was exactly the kind of thing Elara Vance would wear. The saleswoman said it was very chic, Julian said, watching my face with a mixture of anxiety and hope. It reminded me of your vibrancy. My vibrancy. I dress exclusively in monochrome. My wardrobe is a study in charcoal, slate, and ivory. I possess the aesthetic discipline of a Japanese minimalist. This scarf was not for me. It was a projection. He was buying for Elara. Or worse, he was trying to dress me in her skin. He wanted the woman in his bed to match the woman in his head. It is striking, I said, lifting the silk. It felt slippery and cheap against my fingers, despite the designer label. Thank you, Julian. It is very bold. I knew you would like it, he beamed, relieved. I thought you could use a splash of color. Break up the gray a bit. He wanted to break me up. He wanted to dismantle Lavinia Greystone and reassemble me as a gaudy imitation of my failure of a cousin. I smiled, a tight, thin expression that he mistook for gratitude. I am going to take a shower, he said, loosening his tie. Wash off the airport grime. Go ahead, I said. I will pour us some wine. The moment the bathroom door clicked shut, I did not reach for the wine bottle. I reached for my phone. The audio bugs I had planted via the hacked smart home system were live. I tapped the icon for the master bathroom. The sound of the shower started, a heavy deluge of water designed to drown out conversation. It was a classic counter-surveillance measure, or at least, what an amateur thinks is a counter-surveillance measure. He did not know that the high-fidelity microphones I used could filter out white noise frequencies with a simple algorithm. I adjusted the levels on my phone, isolating the vocals. Pick up, Julian hissed. He was not in the shower. He was standing next to it, the water running as a decoy. Pick up, damn it! A pause. Then, Elara's voice cut through the static, sharp and agitated. Why are you calling? You are supposed to be playing the loving husband. She liked the scarf, Julian whispered. She bought it. She has no idea. Elara, she is completely docile. I don't care about the scarf, Elara snapped. Her voice was guttural, stripped of the fake sophistication she projected on social media. Did you get the biometric data the buyer is pushing? They want the keys to Vault 7 before the end of the month. Vault 7. The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. I sat perfectly still, the hideous scarf still draped over my lap like a poisonous snake. Vault 7 was not just a server room. It was not just blueprints or architectural data. Vault 7 was the darkest, most impenetrable corner of Aegis Prime. It was where we stored the ghost profiles, the true identities, asset allocations, and blackmail material for our most elite clients. Billionaires, heads of state, arms dealers who wanted to remain anonymous. It was a repository of secrets worth trillions. If that data was breached, governments would fall, currencies would crash, and I, as the director of risk management, would be the one held responsible. I would not just be fired. I would be indicted for gross negligence. I would spend the rest of my life in a federal prison while they sipped margaritas on a non-extradition island. I am working on it, Julian pleaded. I need her thumbprint. The 3D print from the wine glass was too smudged. The resolution wasn't high enough for the scanner. Then get a better one, Elara shrieked. Get her drunk. Drug her. I don't care. Julian, we have 5 days before the window closes. If we don't deliver the Vault 7 access codes, the Russians walk away, and we are left with nothing but debt. I will get it, Julian promised, his voice trembling. I will get it tonight. Just stay calm. Don't tell me to stay calm, she hissed. I have waited my whole life to take what she has. Don't screw this up. The line went dead. I pulled the earbuds out slowly. The silence in the living room felt heavy, pressurized. This was not a love affair. This was a heist. The realization washed over me, cold and clarifying. I had been analyzing this situation like a wife, looking for emotional betrayal. I should have been analyzing it like an actuary. Julian did not love Elara. Elara did not love Julian. They were business partners in a conspiracy to liquidate my life. And then, the second realization hit, the one that made my stomach turn. 5 years. We had been married for 5 years. Julian had met me at a gallery opening in River North. I remembered it vividly. I was standing in front of a Rothko, admiring the brutal simplicity of the color blocks. He had stepped up beside me and made a comment about the architecture of silence in the painting. It was exactly the kind of pretentious, insightful thing I would have said. We had talked for 3 hours. He liked the same obscure jazz records. He preferred the same vintage of Pinot Noir. He hated the same authors. I thought I had found my soulmate. But now, staring at the scarf that represented the real Julian, I understood. He had not been my soulmate. He had been a mirror. Elara. Elara knew everything about me. She knew my tastes, my weaknesses, my intellectual vanities. She had coached him. She had prepped him like an actor for a role. Every conversation, every shared interest, every moment of connection over the last 5 years had been scripted. He was a parasite, a biological weapon designed by my cousin to infiltrate my defenses. I felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to close my eyes. It wasn't heartbreak. Heartbreak implies the loss of something real. This was the nausea of discovering you have been eating rotten meat for 5 years and enjoying the taste. It was the humiliation of the intellect. I prided myself on seeing patterns, on detecting fraud, yet I had let the biggest fraud of all sleep in my bed, hold my hand, and share my life. I stood up and walked to the kitchen island. I needed to see the evidence. The audio was damning, but I needed the physical proof of their mechanism. I opened my laptop and accessed the server of the private investigators I had hired. They had been busy while Julian was traveling. They had located the architectural studio Julian rented in an industrial park near the airport. It was a tax write-off I had helped him set up. I clicked on the file labeled surveillance_interior_unit 404. The investigators had managed to hack the localized security camera inside the warehouse. The feed was grainy, black and white, but clear enough. The room was not an architect's studio. There were no drafting tables, no models of skyscrapers. It was a workshop. In the center of the room sat a high-end resin 3D printer, the kind used for medical prototyping. Next to it was a centrifuge and a digital microscope. I fast-forwarded the footage to 3 days ago. Just before Julian left for his trip, I watched my husband enter the frame. He was holding a plastic bag. He pulled out a wine glass, a Rydell crystal glass from our kitchen. I recognized it. It was the glass I had used the night before he left. He placed the glass under a scanner. He wore latex gloves. He carefully dusted the rim with powder, then used a high-resolution camera to photograph the latent prints. He fed the data into a computer. I watched him wait as the 3D printer hummed to life. Layer by layer, it was building something. A small, flesh-colored object, a thumb. He was printing a prosthetic replica of my right thumb. The video showed him testing it on a spare biometric lock he had seemingly purchased for practice. He pressed the fake thumb against the scanner. The light on the lock blinked red. Denied. He slammed his fist on the table in frustration. Too smudged, he had told Elara. He needed a fresh sample. I closed the laptop. My hands were trembling, not from fear, but from a rage so cold it felt like liquid nitrogen in my veins. They were going to frame me. That was the endgame. They would use my biometric data to access Vault 7. They would download the identities of the world's most powerful people. They would sell it to the Russian mob or the highest bidder, and when the theft was discovered, the logs would show that I had accessed the vault. My thumbprint, my retina, my credentials. They would take the money and disappear to a non-extradition country, probably the Maldives or Dubai. Places Elara drooled over in magazines. and I would be left to explain to the FBI why I had sold out my country and my clients. It was a perfect plan. It relied on the one blind spot every human has: the person they sleep next to. The bathroom door opened. Steam billowed out, carrying the scent of sandalwood soap. Julian emerged, a towel wrapped around his waist, his hair wet and tousled. He looked wholesome. He looked like the man I had married. "Is that wine ready?" he asked, flashing a boyish grin. I looked at him. I looked at the creature who had spent 5 years studying me like a lab rat, extracting my secrets, mapping my vulnerabilities. Also, he could skin me alive and give the pelt to my cousin. "Just opening it now," I said. My voice was smooth, unbroken. I turned to the wine rack. I selected a bottle, not the expensive Pinot Noir he pretended to like for my sake. I picked a bottle of heavy, tannic Cabernet. "You know," I said, pulling the cork with a steady hand, "I was thinking about your project, the airport." "Oh." He walked into the kitchen, confident, unsuspecting. "What about it?" "It requires a lot of security clearance, doesn't it?" I asked, pouring the wine. "Biometrics, retinal scans, high-level encryption." He froze for a fraction of a second. Just a glitch in the matrix. Then he recovered. "Yes, standard stuff. Why?" I turned and handed him the glass. I made sure my fingers brushed his. I wanted him to feel how cold I was. "Because I want to help you," I lied. "I have some new protocols we are testing at Aegis. Top of the line. Maybe I could show you how we handle high-value asset protection. It might give you an edge on the bid." His eyes lit up. It was the look of a predator seeing a wounded gazelle limp into the open. He thought I was handing him the key. He thought he had won. "That would be incredible, Lavinia," he said, taking the glass. "You would do that for me?" "Of course," I said, clinking my glass against his. "What is mine is yours. Julian." "Right." He drank. "Right. To us." "To us," I echoed. I watched him swallow the wine. I watched the throat of the man I was going to destroy. He thought he was the parasite. He thought he was the one feeding on me. He did not realize that in the natural world, the most dangerous parasites are not the ones that kill the host. They are the ones that take over the host's brain and march them into the jaws of a larger predator. I was not the host anymore. I was the predator. And dinner was just being served. "I am tired," I said, setting my glass down. "Let's go to bed. I have a feeling tomorrow is going to be a very productive day." I led him to the bedroom, the room where the second phone had lit up the darkness. I would let him sleep. I would let him dream of his millions. I would let him think he was days away from victory. Because when he woke up, he would find that the glass walls of my life were not there to keep people out. They were there to keep him in. The weekend was not spent in tears. Tears are a dehydration of the spirit, a waste of electrolytes that I could not afford. Instead, I spent 48 hours coding. I built a ghost, in the secure sandbox environment of my private server. I constructed a digital replica of Vault 7. To the untrained eye, and even to a moderately skilled one, it looked exactly like the crown jewel of Aegis Prime's database. It had the same directory structure, the same encryption headers, and the same file naming conventions, but inside, it was hollow. The client profiles were fabrications generated by an AI I had trained on outdated census data. The financial records were randomized noise, and buried deep within the kernel of this data packet was a tracker, a polymorphic beacon designed to ping my smartwatch the moment the files were opened on an unauthorized device. I called it the Mirror Protocol. It was the cheese in the mousetrap. Now, I just needed the rat to get hungry. On Monday morning, I initiated the performance. I did not get out of bed at 6. When Julian rolled over, expecting the usual sounds of my morning routine, he found me still under the duvet, pressing a cold compress to my forehead. "Lavinia," he whispered, his voice thick with sleep. "Are you all right?" "Migraine," I murmured, keeping my eyes squeezed shut. "It feels like a drill behind my right eye." I can't look at the light. I think I have to stay home. I felt him pause. I could practically hear the gears in his head grinding, shifting from concern to opportunity. If I stayed home, I was a variable, but if I was incapacitated at home, I was a resource. I am so sorry, darling, he said, smoothing my hair. His touch felt like a spider crawling across my skin. You rest. I will take care of you. I can work from the home office today. You are too good to me, I lied. He left the room to make tea. My special blend, he called out from the hallway. It will help you sleep. The moment he turned the corner, I pulled my phone from under the pillow. I opened the app linked to the kitchen camera, a pinhole lens hidden inside the motion sensor of the smoke detector. The feed was crisp. I watched my husband standing at the granite island. He was not just steeping chamomile. He was crushing a small blue pill into a fine powder on the counter. He swept the dust into the steaming mug and stirred it with a vigorous, frantic energy, benzodiazepine, probably Xanax or Valium, enough to knock me out for 6 hours, enough time to rob me blind. He walked back toward the bedroom. I slid the phone away and went limp. Here, he said softly, sitting on the edge of the bed. Sit up just a little. Drink this while it is warm. I allowed him to lift my head. I took the mug, my hands trembling with feigned weakness. I took a small sip, just enough to wet my lips, and then grimaced. It is too hot, I whispered. Let me set it on the nightstand for a minute. Okay, he said, watching the mug with intense focus. But drink it soon. It will help the pain. I will, I promised. Can you close the blackout curtains all the way? The sliver of light is killing me. He stood up to adjust the drapes. In the 3 seconds his back was turned, I poured the contents of the mug into the dense soil of the potted fiddle-leaf fig next to my bed. The plant would likely die within the week, a small casualty in this war. When he turned back, I was placing the empty mug on the coaster, wiping my mouth with the back of my hand. That was fast, he noted, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. I just want to sleep, I said, sliding back down. Thank you, Julian. Sleep, he soothed. I will be right in the next room if you need me. He left the door ajar. I waited. 10 minutes, 20 minutes. I regulated my breathing, forcing it into the deep, rhythmic cadence of the unconscious. I lay perfectly still, my body a statue, while my mind was racing at the speed of light. Then I heard it. The floorboard in the hallway creaked. He was coming. I had prepared for this moment. Before he had even woken up, I had inserted a pair of specialized contact lenses. They were prototypes from the Aegis RD lab, designed for diplomats traveling in hostile surveillance zones. They looked clear, but they contained a micromesh layer that scattered infrared light. To a retinal scanner, my eyes would read as a blurred, unreadable static. Julian crept into the room. He was moving in his socks. He stood over me for a long time, listening. I did not twitch. I did not swallow. I let my jaw go slack. Lavinia, he whispered. Silence. He waved a hand in front of my face. Nothing. Out cold, he muttered to himself. The mattress dipped as he sat down next to me. He did not hesitate. He reached for my right hand. His grip was clammy. He lifted my limp hand and pressed my thumb against the sensor of my work phone, which I had left on the nightstand. The phone chirped softly, unlocked. Step 1, he breathed. He navigated to the Aegis Secure app. I knew exactly what he was seeing. The login screen required a second factor of authentication. Biometric iris scan. This was the hurdle. This was where he would get desperate. Come on, he whispered. He leaned over me, with his free hand. He pried my right eyelid open. It took every ounce of my discipline not to recoil. I stared unseeingly ahead, my pupil fixed on the ceiling. He held the phone above my eye, lining up the camera. The phone beeped, a harsh, discordant tone. Scan failed. Damn it, he hissed. He tried again. He pulled my eyelid wider. his fingernails digging into my brow. The phone beeped again. Scan failed. Subject unreadable. "What is wrong with you?" he cursed, panic entering his voice. "Wake up enough to scan. You useless woman." He dropped my head back onto the pillow. He was pacing now. I could hear his rapid breathing. He was running out of options. Elara would be screaming in his ear if he failed. He needed a back door. I had given him one. I had created a digital sticky note in the phone's unsecured notes app. I had labeled it emergency_backup_codes. It was the kind of careless mistake a stressed executive might make writing down a password because they kept forgetting it. Julian knew I was fastidious, but he also knew I was overwhelmed. He would bank on my human error. I heard him tapping furiously on the screen. He was searching the phone. "Yes," he exhaled. "Yes, yes, yes." He had found the note. He typed the code into the secure app. Access granted. He was in. Or rather, he was in the hall of mirrors I had built for him. "Elara, I am in," he whispered, presumably speaking into a hidden earpiece. "The biometric failed, but she wrote the override code down. Can you believe it? She is losing her edge." I lay there, listening to him insult my intelligence while he fell into the trap I had dug with my own hands. "Downloading the packet now," he said. "Mirroring it to the server you set up." I waited. The download would take approximately 90 seconds. 90 seconds of him stealing nothing but zeros and ones that would eventually lead the FBI to his doorstep. "Done," he said. "Disconnecting. Wiping the access log." He placed the phone back on the nightstand, exactly where it had been. He tucked my hand back under the covers. A final, mocking gesture of care. "Sleep tight, cash cow," he whispered. He left the room. I waited until I heard the door to his home office close. Then, I opened my eyes. I reached under my pillow and pulled out my smartwatch. It had been vibrating silently against my wrist for the last minute. A message notification was waiting. It was not from my security team. It was from the keylogger I had installed on his laptop. He had sent a text to Elara via an encrypted messaging app on his computer. "Got the package. The bitch is out cold. Uploading to the buyer in 1 hour." I stared at the words. "The bitch is out cold." Something inside me fractured. It was not a break. It was a realignment. For the last few days, a small, foolish part of me had been grieving. That part had remembered the way he held me when my mother died. It had remembered the mornings we spent reading in bed. It had remembered the man I thought I loved. But reading those 5 words, "The bitch is out cold," incinerated that grief. It burned away the last vestige of Lavinia the wife and left only Lavinia the director. He did not see me as a person. He saw me as an obstacle, an object to be drugged, used, and discarded. I sat up. The migraine act was over. I went to the bathroom and removed the contact lenses, flushing them down the drain. I splashed cold water on my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were hard. Green glass. "Checkmate, Julian," I said to my reflection. I walked into my walk-in closet and locked the door. I sat on the floor, surrounded by rows of designer shoes I rarely wore, and dialed a number I had never used but kept for the ultimate worst-case scenario. "Marcus Hale," a voice answered on the second ring. It was a voice like gravel wrapped in silk. Marcus was a forensic accountant and attorney who specialized in high-conflict divorce involving complex assets. In other words, he was a shark who ate other sharks. "This is Lavinia Greystone," I said. "I need you to initiate a scorched earth protocol, immediate asset freeze, but I need it done quietly. No filing until I give the signal." "Lavinia," Marcus said, his tone shifting from professional to intrigued. "I wondered when you would call. I saw some interesting movement on the shadow tickers regarding Aegis stock. Is this related?" "It is," I said. "My husband just attempted to sell corporate secrets. I have the evidence. But before I hand him to the feds, I want to strip him naked. Financially speaking." "I can do that," Marcus said. "Give me access." "You have it. I am sending the authorization keys now. Move my personal liquid assets to the offshore trust in the Caymans. Leave the joint accounts active but flag them for suspicious activity monitoring with the bank's fraud department. I want every dime he tries to spend to trigger an alert. Done, Marcus said. But Lavinia, I did a preliminary background sweep when you pinged my server 5 minutes ago. You need to know something. What? I ran a cross-check on Julian Thorne and Elara Vance against state records. I found something in Nevada. I gripped the phone tighter. Tell me. They are not just dating, Lavinia, and this isn't a new partnership. I found a marriage certificate from Las Vegas, dated 6 years ago. The heir left the closet. 6 years. That is impossible, I said. I married him 5 years ago. Exactly, Marcus said. He is a bigamist, but the names on the Nevada certificate are slightly different. Julian Thorne is listed as Julian Vane. Elara is listed as Elena Vane. They used altered social security numbers, synthetic identities, but the biometric photos in the clerk's database match. They have been legally married to each other longer than he has been married to you. The world tilted. 6 years. That meant they were together before he met me. That meant the meeting at the gallery, the courtship, the wedding. It was all a long con. They were a team from the very beginning. They were a pair of grifters who had targeted me not just for a quick score, but for a long-term harvest. He was never mine. He was hers the entire time. Every time he kissed me, he was going home to her in his mind. Every dollar he spent of our money was community property of their marriage. They set up a shell corporation in Nevada, too, Marcus continued. Vane Holdings. It is where they have been funneling the money he steals from you. It is a laundering operation. Lavinia, you are not just a victim of adultery. You are the victim of a racketeering enterprise. I felt a laugh bubble up in my throat. It was a dark, jagged sound. Racketeering, I repeated. Bigamy, fraud, espionage. We have them on everything, Marcus said. I can have the police at your door in 20 minutes. No, I said. The coldness in my chest had spread to my limbs. I felt powerful. I felt invincible. Not yet. Police are for people who want justice. I don't want justice. Marcus, I want annihilation. What is the plan? He thinks he just stole the keys to the kingdom, I said. He thinks he is about to become a very rich man. I am going to let him believe it. I am going to let him deliver that data to the Russians. I want him to feel the high. I want him to taste the champagne. And then, I said, standing up and unlocking the closet door. I am going to burn the building down with him inside it. I hung up the phone. I walked back out into the bedroom. I lay down on the bed and pulled the covers up to my chin. I closed my eyes. When Julian came back in an hour to check on his sleeping wife, I would be breathing evenly. I would be the picture of vulnerability. I would be the perfect victim, but beneath the sheets, my hands were fists, and I was already writing the eulogy for Julian Thorne. The annual Aegis Prime Gala is the kind of event where the champagne flows like water and the smiles are as rigid as the reinforced steel beams of our headquarters. It is a masquerade ball without masks, a gathering where net worth is displayed on wrists and necks, while moral bankruptcy is carefully tucked away inside tuxedo pockets. Usually, I despise it. I treat it as a necessary corporate ritual, attending in severe black silk, shaking hands, and leaving precisely at 10 o'clock. But tonight was different. Tonight, I was not dressing for a board meeting. I was dressing for an execution. I chose red, not a polite burgundy or a demure crimson, but a violent, arterial scarlet that screamed for attention. The dress was a custom Valentino, backless and structured like armor, with a slit that climbed dangerously high up my thigh. I paired it with diamond drop earrings that caught the light like shards of ice. When I walked into the living room, Julian looked up from his phone and actually dropped it. "You look incredible," he stammered, his eyes widening. He was wearing his tuxedo, the one I had bought him, looking every inch the distinguished architect, but underneath the starch and wool, I could smell his fear. It was a sour note cutting through his expensive cologne. "Thank you, darling," I said, fastening a diamond bracelet around my wrist. The clasp clicked with the finality of a handcuff. I thought we should make a statement tonight. After all, Big changes are coming." He swallowed hard. He thought I meant his imaginary airport project. I meant the end of his world. The gala was held at the modern wing of the Art Institute, a glass box suspended over the city. The air inside was conditioned to a perfect 68 degrees, yet Julian was sweating. He kept checking his watch, his eyes darting toward the exits. He believed the heist was complete. He believed the data was sold. He was likely calculating how soon he could feign a headache and leave to celebrate with Elara. He had no idea that I had invited her. I had sent the invitation anonymously, addressed to Elena Vane, potential angel investor. It was a test of her narcissism. I knew she could not resist. Elara had spent her entire life pressing her nose against the glass of my existence. If someone opened a door, she would walk through it, even if it led straight into a blast furnace. We circulated through the room. I held Julian's arm with a grip that was less affectionate and more custodial. I introduced him to board members, smiling as I praised his genius. And then, I saw her. She was standing near the ice sculpture, holding a flute of champagne like a prop she had not quite learned how to use. She was wearing a silver gown that was too tight in the bust and too loose in the hips. A garment that cost a fortune but looked cheap because she did not know how to carry it. She was scanning the room, her eyes hungry, looking for the validation she believed she deserved. But it was not the dress that made my breath hitch. It was the necklace. Resting against her collarbone was a vintage sapphire pendant surrounded by a halo of diamonds. It was unmistakable. It was my mother's necklace. It had vanished from my jewelry box 3 years ago. Shortly after a dinner party where Julian had insisted we hire a new cleaning service, I had fired the maid, convinced she had stolen it. I had carried that guilt for years. And there it was, hanging around the neck of the woman who was sleeping with my husband. Julian followed my gaze. I felt his bicep turn to stone under my fingers. He stopped walking. "Oh God," he whispered, barely audible. "What is she doing here?" I pretended not to hear him. I steered him directly toward her. "Lavinia." "Wait," Julian hissed, trying to plant his feet. "We should go say hello to the chairman." "Nonsense," I said, my voice bright and brittle. "That woman over there looks so familiar. I feel like we simply must meet her." I dragged him across the polished concrete floor. Elara saw us coming. Her eyes widened, panic flaring for a second before she masked it with a sneer of triumph. She thought she had won. She thought she was wearing my jewelry as a trophy of her victory. "Hello," I said, stopping 2 feet in front of her. Up close, I could see the heavy foundation trying to cover the stress lines around her mouth. "I am Lavinia Greystone. I don't believe we have been introduced." Elara looked at Julian, then at me. She straightened her spine, thrusting the necklace forward. "Elena Vane," she said, her voice dripping with fake honey. "I am in real estate, virtual real estate. Fascinating," I said, "and this is my husband, Julian." Julian looked like he was about to vomit on his shoes. "Elena," he croaked. I stepped closer to her, invading her personal space. I reached out and touched the sapphire pendant with one finger. The stone was cold. "That is an exquisite piece," I said softly. Elara smirked. "Thank you. It was a gift, from a very dear admirer." I tilted my head, studying the stone as if looking for inclusions. "It is funny," I said, my voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "It looks exactly like a necklace I used to own. My mother left it to me, but I threw it away years ago." Elara's smirk faltered. "You threw it away?" "Oh, absolutely." I laughed, a light, tinkling sound that echoed off the glass walls. It was cursed. You see, everyone who wore it ended up destitute or in prison. It carried such terrible negative energy. I just tossed it in the trash. I'm amazed someone fished it out. The color drained from Elara's face. She looked down at the necklace as if it had suddenly turned into a live tarantula. Julian made a choking sound. "But I am sure yours is just a replica," I added, stepping back. "You don't look like the type of woman who would wear another woman's discarded trash." I pulled Julian away before she could respond. His legs were shaking so badly I practically had to carry him. "Lavinia," he gasped when we were out of earshot. "That was Intense. Was it? I asked innocently. I just hate bad jewelry. Darling, you know that. I did not give him time to recover. The night was a gauntlet, and I was running him through every station. Come, I said. There is someone very important I want you to meet. I led him toward the VIP section, where a man with silver hair and a predatory smile was holding court. It was Viktor Volkov, the CEO of a rival security firm. He was also the man Julian had been communicating with via the encrypted dark web channels. He was the buyer. Julian froze again. He recognized Volkov. He had likely spent hours on video calls with him, his face hidden or pixelated. But he knew the man, and Volkov knew the seller was an insider. Mr. Volkov? I said, extending my hand. Lavinia. Volkov purred, taking my hand and kissing the air above it. The lioness of Aegis Prime. To what do I owe the pleasure I want to introduce you to my better half? I said, pulling Julian forward. This is Julian Thorne, my husband. Volkov's eyes narrowed. He looked at Julian with a sudden, sharp recognition. He put the pieces together instantly. The seller, the insider, the husband. A slow, cruel smile spread across Volkov's face. He realized the game instantly. He realized that Julian was not a mastermind. He was a traitor sleeping in the enemy's bed. Mr. Thorne, Volkov said, shaking Julian's limp hand. I have heard so much about you. Lavinia keeps you hidden away. I can see why. You are a man of many secrets. I assumed Julian could not speak. He just nodded, looking like a deer caught in the headlights of a semi-truck. Julian is an architect, I interjected smoothly. He designs structures. He is currently working on a very complex project involving transparency. Aren't you, darling transparency? Volkov laughed. A rare commodity in our business. Well, Mr. Thorne, I look forward to seeing the final results of your work. I expect it will be explosive. Volkov winked at me and walked away. Julian looked like he was having a cardiac event. Did he know? Julian whispered, his voice trembling. Why did he look at me like that? He is just a competitor. Julian, I soothed, brushing invisible lint off his lapel. Stop being so paranoid. You are shaking. Let's dance. It will calm your nerves. I dragged him onto the dance floor. The orchestra was playing a waltz, something melancholic and circular. I put one hand on his shoulder and the other in his sweating palm. We began to move. I led. I always led. Julian moved mechanically, his eyes unfocused. He was surrounded by the people he was trying to rob. Wearing the tuxedo bought with their money, dancing with the woman he planned to destroy. The cognitive dissonance was tearing him apart. I pulled him close, pressing my body against his. To an observer, it looked like passion. To him, it must have felt like a constrictor snake tightening its coils. You are so warm. Julian, I whispered into his ear. I am fine. He managed to say. Are you? I asked. Because you feel feverish. Is it hot in here? Julian. Or are you standing on a fire? He stumbled, missing a step. He looked at me, searching my eyes for the truth. But my eyes were mirrors. They reflected only his own guilt. What do you mean? He asked. I mean passion. Darling, I said, smiling. The fire of ambition. I can feel it radiating off you. You feel like a man who is about to achieve everything he deserves. He relaxed slightly, the double meaning flying over his head. Yes, he breathed. Yes, I am. The music swelled to a crescendo. I spun him around, ending the dance with a flourish. The room applauded. Julian smiled. A weak, sickly thing. Then, the lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the stage. The chairman of Aegis Prime walked to the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, the chairman boomed, tonight is a night of celebration, and we have a special surprise. I squeezed Julian's hand. This is it, I whispered. One of our own has decided to make a historic contribution to the Aegis Foundation for Cyber Safety. The chairman continued, a donation that speaks to the heart of our mission. I raised my hand. The spotlight swung toward us. It blinded Julian. turning his face into a mask of white shock. Please welcome to the stage my brilliant director of risk management, Lavinia Greystone, and her generous husband, Julian Thorne. The applause was thunderous. I pulled Julian toward the stage. He resisted, digging his heels in, but the social pressure was a riptide. He could not refuse. He stumbled up the stairs after me. I took the microphone. I looked out at the sea of faces. I saw Elara in the back, her face a mask of confusion. I saw Volkov sipping his drink, amused. "Thank you," I said, my voice clear and projecting to the back of the room. Julian and I believe that security is a human right. We believe that those who have benefited from the system have a duty to give back. I turned to Julian. He looked like he was facing a firing squad. That is why, tonight, Julian has decided to donate $1 million to the foundation. The crowd gasped. Then they cheered. Julian made a sound that was half whimper, half gasp. $1 million. It was almost exactly the amount currently sitting in the Vane Holdings account, the money he had siphoned from me. The money from the loans he had taken out in my name. The nest egg for his escape with Elara. I gestured to the side of the stage. A giant novelty check was brought out. It was already filled out, signed with his name. I handed him a real pen and a real checkbook that I had taken from his jacket pocket earlier. "Sign it, darling," I whispered, covering the microphone. "Unless you want to explain to everyone here, including the IRS agents at table 4, why you can't." He looked at me. He looked at the crowd. He looked at Elara, who was frantically shaking her head in the distance. But if he didn't sign, he exposed himself as a fraud right there. If he didn't sign, the illusion of wealth he had built to impress Volkov collapsed. His hand shook violently. He took the pen. He bent over the podium. I watched as he wrote the check. I watched him sign away his freedom fund. I watched him sign away Elara's patience. He straightened up, pale as a ghost. I took the check from him and held it up. "To a safer future," I declared. The room erupted. Flashbulbs popped. Capturing the moment, Julian Thorne became the most generous philanthropist in Chicago, using the money he had stolen to destroy me. I hugged him on stage, burying my face in his neck. "Smile, Julian," I whispered against his jugular. "You are a hero now, and heroes always pay the highest price." We walked off the stage. Julian collapsed into the nearest chair, hyperventilating. Elara had vanished. She had likely run to the bathroom to call him, to scream, to demand answers. I poured him a glass of water. "Drink up," I said. "We have a long night ahead of us. And Julian." He looked up at me, his eyes hollow. "Happy anniversary," I said. He did not answer. He couldn't. He was a man who had just realized that the fire he was standing on was consuming him from the feet up, and the woman holding the extinguisher was watching him burn with a smile on her face. The digital payload I had constructed was a thing of terrifying beauty. In the sterile language of code, it was a masterpiece of malicious compliance. To the buyer, the file Julian had stolen looked like a terabyte of high-level architectural schematics and biometric keys. It had the right headers, the right file extensions, and the right encryption protocols. But beneath that veneer lay the worm. I had christened it the Trojan Icarus. Its function was simple but devastating. Upon decryption by an unauthorized key specifically, the decryption key Julian had sold to the Russian syndicate, the code would not just open the files, it would invert them. It would overwrite every sector of the buyer's hard drive with random binary noise, effectively bricking their system. But that was just the insult. The injury was the secondary command. The moment the file was accessed, it broadcasted a silent, high-frequency beacon. It did not ping back to me. That would be traceable. Instead, it pinged directly to the Cybercrimes Division of the FBI, flagging the IP address as a node for active corporate espionage and offering up the precise GPS coordinates of the terminal accessing the stolen property. I sat in my home office on Wednesday morning, 48 hours after the gala, drinking matcha and watching the cascade of events on my private monitor. The upload bar on the mirrored server hit 100%. The transfer was complete. Julian and Elara had officially sold a bomb to the mob. At 10 o'clock in the morning, the beacon activated. I saw the signal flare on my screen. The IP address traced back to a server farm in St. Petersburg, but the access point was routed through a proxy in a warehouse in New Jersey. The FBI would have a SWAT team rolling within the hour. But the Russians were faster than the FBI. I walked into the living room. Julian was pacing. He had called in sick to his firm again, claiming a stomach flu. He looked like a man who had not slept in days. His skin was the color of old parchment, and his hands shook so violently he could barely hold his phone. The phone buzzed. It was the burner phone, the one he thought I did not know about. He looked at the screen and made a sound like a wounded animal. He dropped the phone on the sofa as if it had burned him. I walked over and picked up a magazine, glancing at the screen before it went dark. It was a text message. No words, just a photo. It was a picture of our apartment building, taken from the street level, taken 5 minutes ago. The message was clear. We know where you live, and we know you sold us garbage. Julian, I said, my voice cutting through his panic. You look terrible. You are vibrating. He jumped, spinning around to face me. His eyes were wide, the pupils blown. I am fine, he stammered. Just work stress. The project, it is complicated. It looks like more than stress, I observed, sitting down and crossing my legs. You look like you are being hunted. He laughed, a high, hysterical sound. Hunted. Don't be ridiculous. Lavinia. Who would hunt an architect? I shrugged. People who are disappointed with the design. Perhaps. I watched him spiral. He went to the window, peering through the blinds, then jerked back as if he had been shot. He was terrified. He knew that the people he had dealt with did not file lawsuits. They filed bodies. We need to get away, I said suddenly. He looked at me, hope warring with confusion. What I think we need a break, I continued, smoothing my skirt. The gala was exhausting. You are clearly burned out, and honestly, I could use some fresh air. Why don't we go to the cabin? The cabin was a modern A-frame structure my family owned in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. It was isolated, surrounded by 20 acres of dense pine forest. It was beautiful, and it was a dead zone. No cell service, no Wi-Fi unless I activated the satellite uplink, which only I controlled. Julian's face lit up. To him, the cabin was not a trap. It was a bunker. It was a place where the Russians could not find him. A place to hide while he figured out how to fix the mess he had made. Yes, he breathed. Yes, that sounds perfect. When can we leave now? I said, pack a bag. The drive took 6 hours. As we moved further north, the city fell away, replaced by the imposing silence of the woods. I drove the Range Rover. Julian sat in the passenger seat, clutching his burner phone until the signal bars dropped to 0 when the no-service notification appeared. He let out a breath that was half relief, half terror. He was safe from the texts, but he was also cut off from Elara. He was alone with me. We arrived at dusk. The cabin was cold. I unlocked the door and engaged the smart system, bringing the lights up slowly. I will start a fire, Julian said, rushing to the fireplace. He needed to do something with his hands. I went to the kitchen to prepare dinner. I moved with deliberate slowness. I unpacked the groceries. I set the table. And then, I began the psychological dismantling of my husband. I had brought a few items with me, small things, a specific brand of cigarettes that Elara smoked. Even though neither of us smoked, a tube of lipstick and her signature shade of coral. While Julian was in the other room getting firewood, I placed the pack of cigarettes on the mantel, right next to his family photo. He came back in, arms full of logs. He froze when he saw the pack. Is something wrong? I asked from the kitchen, chopping vegetables with a heavy cleaver. He dropped the wood. Who? Who has been here? He asked, his voice trembling. What do you mean? I walked into the living room, wiping my hands on a towel. These, he pointed to the cigarettes. These aren't ours. I looked at the pack. I frowned. Oh, those I think your cousin stayed here last month. Or maybe it was the cleaning crew. Why does it matter? It wasn't his cousin. He knew that brand. He stared at the pack, paranoia blooming in his eyes. He was wondering if Elara had been here, if she was watching him, if she had set him up. I picked up the pack and tossed it into the fire. It flared green and vanished. There, I said. Problem solved. Dinner is ready. We ate in silence. The only sound was the wind howling through the pines and the scrape of silverware on china. You know, I said, taking a sip of red wine. I have been thinking about what you said at the gala, about the future. He looked up, wary. What about it? I think you are right, I said, leaning forward. Disruption is the only way forward. The fork fell from his hand. It clattered loudly onto his plate. That was Elara's phrase. It was the mantra she had used in their private calls, the philosophy of their empire. Hearing it come from my mouth, in this isolated house, made him look at me with genuine horror. Where did you hear that? He whispered. Hear what I asked innocently. It is just a business term. Julian, disruption, innovation. Why are you so jumpy? I am not jumpy, he snapped, then lowered his voice. I am just tired. After dinner, I suggested a movie. Let's watch something classic. I said. I downloaded a few things before we left. I selected a film. It was a noir thriller from the 50s. A story about a woman who discovers her husband is embezzling money and planning to leave her for his secretary. Julian sat on the leather sofa, rigid as a board. I sat next to him, wrapped in a cashmere blanket, sipping my wine. On the screen, the wife confronted the husband. The husband denied it. The wife pulled a gun. Julian flinched when the gun went off. I watched the screen, not him. The wife in the movie was dragging the body to the garden. She is making a mistake, I commented casually. Julian turned his head slowly to look at me. What? The disposal, I said, gesturing to the screen with my glass. Buried in the garden. The soil disruption is too obvious, and the decomposition rate in that climate is too slow. Dogs would smell it within a week. I took another sip of wine, my eyes fixed on the television. If you really want to get rid of a problem, you need a chemical solution. Lye is traditional, of course, but honestly, a wood chipper followed by a pig farm is the most efficient method. No DNA, no dental records, just fertilizer. I turned to look at him. I smiled. Don't you think? Julian. He was hyperventilating. He pushed himself back into the corner of the sofa. He looked at me and saw a stranger. He saw a woman who knew how to hide a body. He saw a woman who had brought him to the middle of nowhere, miles from help, and was talking about wood chippers. Lavinia. He gasped. Yes, darling, I need to tell you something. I paused the movie. The sudden silence was deafening. What is it? I asked. He slid off the sofa onto his knees. It was pathetic. He looked like a child confessing to breaking a vase, except the vase was my life. I am in trouble. He sobbed. Serious trouble. I kept my face impassive. What kind of trouble? There are people, he stammered. Dangerous people. Russians. They targeted me. Because of you. I raised an eyebrow. Because of me. Yes. He grabbed my hand. His palms were sweating. They knew who you were. They knew I was your husband. They blackmailed me. Lavinia. They said they would kill you if I didn't get them information. I stared at him. It was a brilliant lie. It painted him as the martyr, the protector. It absolved him of greed and replaced it with coercion. If I were a normal wife, I might have believed him. I might have held him and cried. But I knew he had initiated the contact. I knew he had printed the fake thumb. I knew about the marriage in Nevada. I see, I said slowly. So you stole from me to save me. Yes. He wept. I didn't want to do it. I swear. I gave them some files. Some old blueprints. I tried to trick them, but now they know. They know the files were fake, and they are coming for me. They sent a picture of the apartment. He looked up at me, his eyes pleading. You have to help me. Lavinia, you are the only one who can fix this. You have connections. You have security teams. Please, don't let them kill me. I looked down at him. I felt a profound sense of disgust. He was not just a thief. He was a coward. He was willing to throw the Russians under the bus, throw Elara under the bus, just to keep his own skin intact. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I tapped the screen, stopping the recording I had started the moment he began to speak. "You admit it?" Then I asked. "You admit you stole proprietary data from Aegis Prime and sold it to a foreign syndicate?" "I had to," he cried. "To protect you." I stood up, pulling my hand away from his grasp. "I believe you, Julian." I lied. He slumped against the sofa, relief washing over him. "Oh, thank God. Thank God. If these people are really after you," I said, walking to the window and looking out at the dark forest, "then we need to act fast. I can use my resources. I can make you disappear." "Yes," he said, scrambling to his feet. "That is what I need. A new identity. Somewhere safe. I can arrange that." I said, "But you have to do exactly what I say. No more secrets. You give me everything. The names of your contacts. The method of transfer. Everything. I will." He promised. "I will give you everything." "Good," I said. "Because if we are going to fight a war, Julian, I need to know where the mines are buried." I turned back to him. His face was flushed with the hope of salvation. He thought he had manipulated me again. He thought he had played the victim card and won. He did not know that the recording on my phone was the final nail in his coffin. He had just confessed to a federal crime. He had destroyed his own defense. "Why don't you pour yourself a drink?" I suggested. "You look like you need it." "I do," he said, moving to the wet bar. "You are amazing. Lavinia, I don't know what I would do without you. You will find out soon enough." I watched him pour the whiskey. His hands were steadier now. He felt safe. He was in the cabin with his capable wife, the fixer, the woman who solved problems for a living. He had forgotten the most important rule of risk management: the closer you are to the solution, the closer you are to the source of the problem. I walked over and kissed him on the cheek. "Don't worry, Julian," I whispered. "I will take care of everything." And as I looked at the fire reflecting in his eyes, I knew I was telling the truth. I would take care of everything. I would scrub the stain of him from my life until there was nothing left but ash. The drive back to Chicago was a blur of asphalt and desperation. I drove the Range Rover with the precise, lethal speed of a drone strike, while Julian curled into the passenger seat, vibrating with a cocktail of hangover and terror. I had told him that to save him, to make the Russians back off. We needed to negotiate with the person holding the leash. I demanded the name of his contact. I demanded the location. If we cut the head off the snake, the body dies. I had told him, my voice calm and authoritative. "Take me to the handler, Julian, or I turn the car around and leave you at the nearest police station." He broke before we even hit the interstate. He didn't confess to the affair. Of course, he clung to his lie that he was a victim. He told me the handler was a woman named Elena, a broker who had tricked him. He claimed she was the one communicating with the syndicate. "She is at the Obsidian Tower," he whispered, staring out the window at the passing darkness. "Apartment 44B. I knew that address. I had seen it on my tracking screen. But hearing him say it, hearing him offer up his lover to save his own skin, gave me a grim satisfaction. He was not loyal. He was not in love. He was a survivor. And survivors will eat their own young if the winter gets cold enough. We arrived at the Obsidian Tower at 2 a.m. The building loomed over the suburbs like a black monolith, silent and imposing. Julian punched the code into the keypad at the side entrance, a service door he clearly knew well. He didn't even realize he was revealing his familiarity. He was on autopilot, driven by the singular need to hide behind my skirts. We took the service elevator up. The silence in the metal box was heavy, suffocating. Julian kept wiping his palms on his jeans. "Let me do the talking," I instructed as the doors slid open. "You just stand there and look pathetic. It seems to be your strong suit." He didn't argue. The hallway on the 44th floor smelled of new carpet and stale fear. We reached the door. Julian hesitated, his hand hovering over the bell. I didn't wait. I pounded on the door. 3 hard, sharp knocks that echoed like gunshots. "Open up," I commanded. "We know you are in there." There was a scrambling sound from inside, a crash, like a suitcase falling over. Then silence. "Elena," Julian called out, his voice cracking. "Open the door. It is me. I brought help." The lock clicked. The door cracked open, held by a security chain. One wild, bloodshot eye peered out. "You brought who?" Elara hissed. "Let us in," I said, pushing my face into the gap. "Unless you want to explain to the hit squad currently tracking your IP address why you sold them a virus instead of a vault key." The chain rattled and fell. The door swung open. The woman who stood there was a ghost of the creature I had seen at the gala. Elara Vance looked like she had been electrocuted. Her dyed red hair was matted, sticking up in tufts. She was wearing a silk robe that was stained with coffee and perhaps wine. Her eyes were rimmed with red, surrounded by dark bruises of exhaustion. The apartment behind her was a disaster zone. Open suitcases covered the floor, clothes thrown haphazardly into piles. Drawers were pulled out. It looked like the aftermath of a hurricane. "Lavinia," she breathed. Stepping back, she looked at Julian, her expression shifting from shock to pure, unadulterated hatred. "You brought her here. Are you insane?" "She knows," Julian pleaded, stepping into the room. "She knows about the Russians. She can fix it. Elara, she has resources." I walked in past them, my heels clicking on the hardwood floor. I surveyed the wreckage of their love nest. It smelled of cigarettes and panic. "I see you are packing for a trip," I noted dryly, picking up a passport from the coffee table. It was a fake, Elena Vane. "Going somewhere nice." Elara snatched the passport from my hand. "Get out," she snarled. "You don't know what you are walking into." "I know exactly what I'm walking into," I said. Turning to face them, I adjusted my glasses. They were a pair of thick-rimmed tortoiseshell frames I often wore when working late. Neither of them knew that these were Ray-Ban Metas, equipped with a high-definition camera and microphone, currently streaming every second of this encounter to a secure cloud server. "I am walking into a failed conspiracy." "Failed?" Elara laughed. A jagged, hysterical sound. "It didn't fail because of us. It failed because she pointed a shaking finger at Julian, "is incompetent. He uploaded the wrong file." "I didn't," Julian shouted back. "I uploaded exactly what I took from her phone. She must have switched it." He looked at me then, dawn breaking over his slow mind. "You switched it," he whispered. "You knew." "Of course I knew," I said, my voice bored. "Did you really think you could bypass a biometric lock with a thumbprint printed in a garage I let you in? Julian, I gave you the dummy data. I gave you the rope." Elara stared at me. Then she stared at Julian. The realization hit her that they were not partners in crime. They were rats in a maze I had built. "You idiot," she screamed at Julian. "You told me she was clueless. You told me she was a soft touch." "She was," Julian yelled. "She was perfect until you got greedy." "Greedy?" Elara advanced on him. "We have nothing, Julian. The accounts are frozen. The buyer is sending kill threats to my burner every 10 minutes, and now you bring the target right to our door." "I am not the target anymore," I interrupted. "You are," Elara turned on me, her eyes wild. "You think you are so smart, don't you, Lavinia? You think you have won because you kept your precious data." "I have won because I am still standing," I said. "And you are hiding in a tower waiting for the mob to come and collect a debt you can't pay." "You don't even know the half of it," Elara sneered. She was vibrating with adrenaline and spite. "You think this was just about the money? You think we just wanted to rob you and run?" "Elara, shut up," Julian warned, his face draining of color. "No," she screamed. "I am done listening to you. He lied to you, Lavinia. He didn't just want the money, he wanted the policy." I froze. "What policy?" "The life insurance." Elara spat the words out like venom. "The key man insurance policy, Aegis Prime took out on you. $10 million, plus your personal policy, another 5. I looked at Julian. He was backing away, shaking his head frantically. That is a lie, he stammered. She is lying. Tell her the plan. Julian? Elara laughed, and it was a terrifying sound. Tell her about the boat trip, the second honeymoon we were going to take after the deal went through the accidental drowning. He didn't just want to leave you, cousin. He wanted to inherit you. The air in the room seemed to vanish. I felt a coldness settle in my marrow that had nothing to do with the temperature. Robbery was one thing, infidelity was another, but murder, I looked at the man I had slept next to for 5 years. I looked at his soft hands, his weak chin, his anxious eyes, and I saw it. I saw the truth in his terror. He wasn't afraid because he was innocent. He was afraid because the monster inside him had just been exposed to the light. Is this true? I asked. My voice was quiet, deadly. No, Julian cried. Lavinia, listen to me. He bought the tickets 2 weeks ago. Elara continued, relentless. One way for him, return for nobody. He was going to push you overboard in the Caribbean and play the grieving widower until the check cleared. Then he was coming to me. You bitch, Julian roared. He lunged at her. It happened fast. The facade of the polite architect crumbled, revealing the desperate, violent animal underneath. He grabbed Elara by the throat. She clawed at his face, her nails digging red furrows into his cheeks. They crashed into the coffee table, shattering a glass vase. Stop it, I shouted, stepping back to avoid the flying debris, but I didn't intervene. I stood there, recording. You ruined everything, Julian screamed, squeezing her neck. You greedy, loud-mouthed parasite. Get off me, Elara gargled, kneeing him in the groin. He doubled over, gasping. Elara scrambled back, coughing, clutching her throat. You want to talk about parasites? I said, my voice cutting through their panting breaths. I reached into my purse and pulled out a folded sheaf of papers. Let's talk about vein holdings. Julian looked up, one hand clutching his stomach. What? I tossed the papers onto the floor between them. They fanned out, revealing bank statements. I had my forensic accountant look at the shell company you two set up, I said, looking at Julian. You thought you were splitting the stolen money 50-50, didn't you? You deposited every check into the joint account, I pointed at Elara. But your loving wife here has been skimming off the top. For every dollar you stole from me, she moved 30 cents into a private crypto wallet you don't have access to. She has stolen nearly $200,000 from you. Julian. Julian froze. He looked at the papers. He looked at Elara. Is that true? He whispered. Elara's eyes darted around the room. He is lying. Lavinia is lying. She is trying to turn us against each other. Look at the dates. Julian, I said cold-heartedly. Look at the transfers. She was planning to dump you the moment the big payout came. She was going to take the $10 million and leave you to face the investigation alone. The betrayal broke something inside him. The last tether of sanity snapped. You stole from me, Julian screamed. I risked my life. I slept with her for 5 years. I planned the murder, and you stole from me. He confessed. He shouted it out loud. I planned the murder. My smart glasses recorded it all. The confession, the motive, the intent. Julian threw himself at Elara again. This time, there was lethal intent. He tackled her to the floor, his hands finding her throat again. Elara screamed, a high, piercing shriek that was cut off abruptly. I watched them, 2 rats in a bucket, eating each other alive. I walked over to the wall near the kitchen. I picked up a heavy cast-iron candlestick holder. For a second, they might have thought I was going to hit them, but I turned and swung it hard against the red box mounted on the wall. The glass of the fire alarm shattered. I pulled the lever down. Beep, beep, beep. The alarm was deafening. It pulsed through the building. A sonic weapon. A second later, the sprinklers overhead hissed and exploded. Water rained down on us. Cold, dirty water that had been sitting in the pipes for months. It soaked the carpet instantly. It drenched the fighting couple, shocking them apart. Julian rolled off Elara, gasping, wiping water from his eyes. The room was chaos. The strobe light from the alarm flashed rhythmically dark. Light, dark, light. Fire, I shouted, though there was no fire. We have to get out. Julian scrambled to his feet, slipping on the wet floor. My phone, he yelled. I need the codes. He lunged for the coffee table where his burner phone, the lifeline to the Russians. The device with the encryption keys was sitting. I was closer. I swiped the phone off the table. I have it, I yelled over the alarm. Move, Julian. The police will be here in 2 minutes. He didn't question me. He was in pure flight mode. He grabbed his bag. Elara was coughing on the floor, trying to crawl toward her purse, in the confusion, in the flashing strobe light and the pouring rain. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out a dummy phone I had bought at a pawn shop 2 days ago. It was the same make and model as Julian's burner. I had scratched the case to match. I slid Julian's real phone, the evidence, into my bra. I held up the dummy phone. Here, I shouted, tossing the fake phone to Julian. He caught it. He clutched it to his chest like a holy relic. He didn't check it. He didn't try to turn it on. He just shoved it into his pocket. Let's go, he screamed. You go, I yelled, pointing to the service stairs. I will take the elevator. We split up. Meet me at the car. He looked at me one last time. He looked at Elara, who was weeping on the soaked floor, and he ran. He ran out the door, abandoning his wife, his partner, and his dignity. I stood there for a moment, the water plastering my hair to my skull, the expensive Valentino dress ruined. I looked down at Elara. She looked up at me, mascara running down her face in black rivers. He left you, I said simply. He left you to die. Elara didn't speak. She just curled into a ball and sobbed. I turned and walked out of the apartment. I didn't run. I walked. I took the stairs down one flight, then called the main elevator. As I descended, I pulled Julian's real phone from my dress. I powered it down. This was the leverage. This was the proof of the conspiracy. The Russian connection, the blackmail. Combined with the video recording of his confession to murder, Julian Thorne was never going to see the outside of a cell again. I walked out of the lobby just as the first police cruisers screeched to a halt at the curb. The blue and red lights danced against the rain-slicked pavement. Fire trucks were turning the corner, sirens wailing. I stood under the awning, shivering slightly, looking like a victim who had just escaped a domestic dispute. A young officer ran up to me. Ma'am, are you okay? Is there a fire? I looked at him, my eyes wide and innocent behind the recording glasses. I don't know, I said, my voice trembling perfectly. My husband. He is upstairs, apartment 44B. He was fighting with a woman. I think he tried to kill her. The officer spoke into his radio. Possible domestic disturbance, 44th floor, suspect is male. I watched them run in. I watched them storm the tower where Julian was running down the stairs with a fake phone and Elara was drowning in her own greed. I walked to my car, got in, and locked the doors. The silence inside was absolute. I took a deep breath. I smelled of wet wool and victory. I started the engine and drove away, leaving the chaos in my rearview mirror. The game was not over, but the board had been cleared, and I was the only one left holding a queen. The drive from the Obsidian Tower to the headquarters of Aegis Prime took 20 minutes. It was 3 a.m. The city was asleep, but capital never sleeps, and neither does revenge. I entered the building not as a wife fleeing a domestic disaster, but as an executive executing a hostile takeover. My wet dress had been replaced by a spare suit I kept in my office suite, a sharp, midnight blue ensemble that signaled authority. My hair was pulled back into a severe chignon. The chaos of the last hour was scrubbed from my skin. I sat at my desk, the nerve center of my existence, and initiated the protocol I had named the Purge. The first step was the narrative control. I could not be seen as a conspirator who let the crime happen to trap her husband. I had to be the vigilant officer who discovered the breach and acted instantly. I connected Julian's confiscated phone, the real one, to an isolated forensic terminal. I extracted the chat logs, the geolocation data, and most importantly, the video file from my smart glasses recording his confession to murder. I drafted a memorandum to the Board of Directors and the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The subject line was simple internal security breach and immediate remediation. In the body of the email, I constructed a timeline that was 90% truth and 10% critical omission. I stated that I had become suspicious of Julian's behavior 48 hours ago. I claimed that I had conducted a covert internal audit and discovered the anomaly in the server logs. I explained that I had confronted Mr. Thorne at the Obsidian Tower, where he confessed to the espionage and the conspiracy to commit murder. I framed my actions at the cabin not as a psychological torture session, but as a containment strategy to prevent him from fleeing before I could secure the physical evidence. I attached the files. I hit send. The timestamp was 3:45 in the morning. By doing this, I had legally immunized myself. I was no longer a wife protecting her husband. I was a whistleblower protecting the shareholders. Step 2 was financial annihilation. I called Marcus Hale. He answered on the first ring, proving that expensive lawyers are worth every penny of their retainer. "It is done," I said. "The package is with the FBI. Now I want you to trigger the divorce clauses." Our prenuptial agreement was a document Julian had signed 5 years ago without reading. He had been too busy playing the role of the romantic artist who didn't care about money. That was a fatal error. Clause 44, subsection B, explicitly stated that any act of financial infidelity, fraud, or criminal activity utilizing marital assets would result in the immediate forfeiture of all claims to community property. "I am looking at the accounts now," Marcus said, his voice crisp. "I am freezing the joint checking, the savings, and the investment portfolio. I am filing an emergency motion to sequester his personal assets to cover the damages to Aegis Prime. Leave him nothing," I commanded. "I want his credit cards declined before the sun comes up. I want his car repossession order filed by 9 o'clock, and Marcus liquidate his personal stock portfolio. Sell it all at market opening. Use the proceeds to pay back the $200,000 he stole from the company. I want the restitution to come out of his pocket, not mine." "Understood," Marcus replied. "And what about the wife, the other one?" "Elara Vance," I said, savoring the name. "Or Elena Vane, as the IRS knows her, or rather, as they don't know her." I opened the website for the Internal Revenue Service. I navigated to the whistleblower section. Form 3949A. Elara had been skimming money from Julian's stolen funds for years. She had been funneling tens of thousands of dollars into crypto wallets and offshore accounts without declaring a cent of income. She was technically unemployed, yet she lived in a luxury high-rise. I filled out the form with meticulous detail. I provided the account numbers for the shell company Vane Holdings. I provided the transaction hashes for her crypto wallets, which my team had traced days ago. I estimated her unpaid tax liability to be in the 6 figures. "Tax evasion," I whispered as I submitted the form. "Al Capone went down for it. So will you." By 6 in the morning, the sun was rising over Lake Michigan, painting the sky in bruises of purple and orange. I turned on the television in my office. The news broke exactly as I had orchestrated. Breaking news: FBI raid at luxury high-rise. The aerial footage showed the Obsidian Tower surrounded by police vehicles. The headline ticker ran across the bottom of the screen: "Cyber espionage ring busted. Major arrests in Chicago." And then, the money shot. The camera zoomed in on the side exit. 2 figures were being led out in handcuffs. Julian looked like a drowned rat. His tuxedo was ruined, his hair plastered to his skull, his face a mask of absolute defeat. He was weeping openly. Beside him, Elara was kicking and screaming, looking less like a femme fatale and more like a feral cat trapped in a drainpipe. They were shoved into separate patrol cars. The doors slammed shut. My phone rang. It was the chairman of the board. "Lavinia," he said, his voice grave. "We received your report. My God. Your own husband. I am devastated." "Sir," I said, letting a tremor enter my voice. I had no idea he was capable of such duplicity. But the moment I found the evidence, I knew I had to put the company first. "You are a patriot, Lavinia," the chairman said. "The board is in shock, but we are behind you 100%. We need you to get out in front of this. The stock is wobbling in pre-market trading. We need a statement." "I am ready," I said. At 10 o'clock, I stood at a podium in the lobby of Aegis Prime. The press corps was a wall of flashing lights. I wore no makeup, letting the shadows under my eyes tell a story of sleepless grief. I wore a simple black dress, projecting the image of a widow mourning a living man. "Last night," I began, my voice steady but soft, "I discovered that the man I have been married to for 5 years was not who he claimed to be, Julian Thorne, along with his accomplice Elara Vance, orchestrated a sophisticated attack on this company. They sought to compromise the security of our clients for personal gain." I paused, looking directly into the camera lenses. "But they failed. Our systems held. Our redundancies worked. And let me be clear, no data was lost. The only thing that was broken last night was my trust." I took a breath. "I have filed for divorce this morning. I am cooperating fully with the FBI. And I want to apologize to anyone who felt deceived by the man I brought into our circle. I was the first victim, but I made sure I was the last." The flashbulbs erupted. The narrative was set. I was not the fool who married a con man. I was the heroine who caught him. By noon, Aegis Prime stock had actually climbed 2%. The market loves a strong leader, even a heartbroken one. But I was not done. Julian had loved things. He loved his bespoke suits, his vintage watch collection, his imported Italian leather shoes. He defined himself by his possessions. 2 days later, I announced the asset recovery auction. I hired a team of movers to strip our penthouse of every single item that belonged to Julian. I rented a ballroom at the Ritz-Carlton. I invited the press. I framed it as a charity event, with all proceeds going to a nonprofit that supported victims of identity theft. It was the ultimate humiliation. I stood on the balcony of the ballroom, watching the sharks circle. "Lot 42, the auctioneer boomed. "A Patek Philippe Nautilus, rose gold, previously owned by Mr. Julian Thorne. It sold for $80,000 to a man Julian despised, a rival architect who had always envied Julian's style." "Lot 55, the auctioneer continued. "A collection of bespoke Brioni suits, slightly worn." People laughed. They were buying the skin of a dead man. I watched as his life was dismantled, piece by piece, and sold to strangers. His vanity was liquidated. His legacy was reduced to a tax write-off for wealthy rubberneckers. I raised a glass of champagne to the empty room in my heart. The apartment was clean now. The smell of his cologne was gone. A week later, I received the call I had been waiting for. "Mr. Thorne has been processed at the Metropolitan Correctional Center," Marcus told me. "He has been denied bail due to flight risk. The fake passport and the offshore accounts made that an easy argument for the prosecutor. He is asking to see you." "Is he?" I asked, checking my calendar. "I have a window at 3 o'clock. The jail was a fortress of gray concrete and hopelessness. It smelled of bleach and unwashed bodies. I sat in the visitation room, on the free side of the thick glass partition, when the guards brought Julian in. I almost didn't recognize him. It had only been 7 days, but he had aged 10 years. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame. His head was shaved standard procedure for lice prevention, I assumed, or maybe just a humiliation tactic. He shuffled to the chair and sat down. He picked up the phone receiver with trembling hands. I picked up mine. "Lavinia," he cracked. His voice was a rasp. "Lavinia, thank God you came." I looked at him calmly. "Hello? Julian?" "You have to get me out of here," he whispered, his eyes darting around the room. "It is a nightmare. There are gangs in here. I can't survive this. You have to call the lawyer. Tell them it was a mistake. A mistake, I repeated. Which part? The bigamy, the embezzlement, or the conspiracy to murder me on a boat? He flinched. I told you. That was Elara. She made me say those things. I was trying to protect you. Stop, I said. The word was a blade. The game is over. Julian, I gave the FBI the recording from the cabin. I gave them the texts from your phone. I gave them the biometric data you tried to steal. He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing. You gave them the recording. I did. But I confessed on that recording because I thought you were saving me, he cried. You tricked me. You gaslit me. I conducted an investigation, I corrected, and you provided the evidence. You can't leave me here, he sobbed, tears cutting tracks through the grime on his face. I am your husband. We had a life. Doesn't that mean anything? It means everything, I said. It means I know exactly what you are worth, and according to the auction yesterday, your net worth is exactly 0. What auction? He blinked. I sold your things, Julian, your watches, your suits, your precious first edition books. I sold them all. You sold my things. To pay back the company, I said, and because I didn't want your ghost haunting my hallway. He slumped against the metal table. The realization was finally sinking in. There was no rescue coming. There was no clever escape plan. What about Elara? He asked weakly. Elara is currently in the women's wing, I said. The IRS has slapped her with 20 years of tax fraud charges on top of the corporate espionage. And since I provided proof that she was stealing from your joint criminal enterprise, the prosecutor is using that to turn you against each other. She has already offered to testify against you in exchange for a lighter sentence. She claims you were the mastermind. She claims the murder plot was entirely your idea. Julian's face went purple. That lying witch. See? I smiled. You two really are perfect for each other. I stood up. Lavinia, please, he begged, slamming his hand against the glass. I need a lawyer. I have no money. I have no one. You have to help me hire a defense. I looked down at him. I adjusted my silk scarf, a tasteful, monochrome Hermes, not the gaudy rag he had bought me. You have a public defender, Julian, I said. I hear they are very overworked. Good luck. Lavinia, he screamed as I turned away. I loved you. In my own way. I loved you. I paused at the door. I looked back at the broken man in the orange suit. That is the saddest part, Julian, I said. I think you actually believe that. I hung up the phone. The guard stepped forward to drag him back to his cell. I watched for a moment, recording the image in my mind not for evidence, but for satisfaction. I walked out of the prison and into the bright, blinding sunlight of a Chicago afternoon. My driver was waiting. Where to, Ms. Greystone? He asked as he opened the door. The bank, I said. I have a deposit to make. The auction had raised nearly $200,000. Technically, it was for charity, but the satisfaction that was tax-free. 3 weeks passed before I returned to the Metropolitan Correctional Center. I did not come out of sentimentality. I came because the paperwork required a signature, and there are certain victories that must be inspected personally to ensure they are absolute. The visiting room had not changed. It was still a box of gray despair, smelling of industrial cleaner and stale sweat. But Julian had changed. If he looked like a drowned rat the last time I saw him, he now looked like a skeleton that had been forgotten in a closet. His orange jumpsuit hung off his frame as if he had shrunk 2 sizes. His skin was the color of ash, and his eyes, once so bright with false charm, were dull and sunken. I sat down on the metal stool. I placed my briefcase on the floor. I did not pick up the phone immediately. I let him look at me. I was wearing a white suit today, pristine, sharp, a stark contrast to the grime of his new world. I wanted him to see the light he could no longer touch. He picked up the receiver slowly. His hand was not trembling anymore. It was steady with the heavy, narcotic calm of total defeat. You came back, he said. His voice was a dry scratch. "I brought the plea agreement," I said, lifting the receiver. Your lawyer says you are hesitating." "He is not my lawyer," Julian whispered. "He is yours. He works for you." "He is paid by me," I corrected. "But he is acting in your best interest. Trust me. Julian, you do not want to go to trial. The video of you confessing to a murder plot. The jury would give you life without parole just for the look on your face." He stared at me through the reinforced glass. It was thick, bulletproof, designed to stop physical projectiles, but it could not stop the truth. "I have been thinking," he said. He leaned forward, his forehead resting against the glass. "I have had a lot of time to think in here. Lavinia, 23 hours a day in a cell gives you a lot of clarity." "I imagine it does." "You were too ready," he said. It wasn't an accusation. It was a realization. "At the cabin, at the apartment, the auction, you moved too fast, even for you." He looked up, meeting my eyes. "When did you know?" "Was it the phone, when the screen lit up?" I looked at him. I evaluated him. For 5 years, I had studied this man like a specimen under a microscope. I knew his coffee order. I knew his sleep cycle. I knew the way he lied about traffic, but I had never shown him the full capacity of my mind. I decided, in this final moment, to give him the only honest gift I had left. "You think it was the phone," I said softly. "You think my world crumbled that night at 2 a.m. when Elara texted you?" I smiled. It was a genuine smile, the kind that reaches the eyes. But it wasn't a smile of warmth. It was the smile of a predator watching prey walk into a cage it built years ago. "The phone was just the punctuation mark. Julian, it was the period at the end of a sentence I started writing 2 years ago." Julian blinked. 2 years? "Do you remember the wine tasting in Napa?" I asked. "The one where you got drunk and started asking me about the encryption protocols for the Vault 7 servers. You asked me if we used quantum-resistant keys." "I was just making conversation," he stammered. "I was interested in your work." "You are an architect, Julian," I said. "You care about limestone and cantilevered beams. You don't care about quantum cryptography. That night, you used a phrase, polymorphic code injection. That is not layperson terminology. That is hacker syntax. Specifically, it is the kind of syntax Elara used to use when she was trying to break into my college email accounts." He pulled back as if I had slapped him. "I knew then," I continued. "I didn't know the scope. I didn't know about the marriage in Nevada. But I knew you were a mole. I knew you were digging." "And you stayed," he whispered. "You slept in the same bed with me for 2 years knowing I was spying on you." "I didn't just stay, Julian. I directed you." I leaned in closer to the glass. "You see, around that same time, Aegis Prime was having a problem. We had a competitor, Viktor Volkov. He was aggressive, undercutting our bids, poaching our clients. But he was slippery. We couldn't prove he was stealing our tech. We needed him to make a mistake. We needed him to reach into the cookie jar so we could slam the lid on his hand." Julian's eyes widened. "Volkov, the man at the gala." "Exactly. I needed a way to deliver a payload to Volkov's secure servers, a virus that would not only destroy his data, but expose his illegal operations to the international authorities. But I couldn't just email it to him. His firewalls are too good. I needed a physical carrier, someone he trusted, someone inside." I pointed a manicured finger at Julian. "I needed a honeypot." "No," Julian breathed. "No. I fed you the breadcrumbs. Julian, I left the security flaws in the blueprints where you could find them. I left the password hints in places you would look. I crafted that fake data packet, the one you stole specifically for you to steal. I knew you would run to Elara. I knew Elara would run to the highest bidder, and I knew the highest bidder would be Volkov." "You used me," he gasped. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. "You didn't just catch me. You engineered the crime." "I optimized the outcome," I corrected. "You thought you were a player. Julian, you thought you were the mastermind pulling a heist. You were never the player. You were the pawn. You were the delivery boy I sent to bomb my enemy's headquarters. He slumped in his chair. He looked physically sick. The narrative of his life, the story where he was the clever con man outsmarting the frigid corporate wife, had just been shredded. He wasn't a villain. He was a tool, a utensil I had used to eat my dinner and then discarded in the sink. The worm I put in that data, I said, twisting the knife, didn't just flag Volkov to the FBI. It erased his leverage. It destroyed his backups. Thanks to you, Aegis Prime has absorbed 40% of his market share in the last week. My bonus this year will be larger than the $10 million you tried to kill me for. He put his head in his hands. He began to sob, dry, heaving sounds that echoed in the small room. I am a joke, he wept. I am just a joke to you. You were a liability, I said. I converted you into an asset. That is what I do. I checked my watch. Now, regarding Mr. Sterling, the lawyer I hired for you, he looked up, his eyes red and swollen. Why hire a lawyer for me if you hate me? Control, Julian. Always control. If you had a public defender, they might try to cut a deal I don't approve of. They might try to argue insanity or coercion. Mr. Sterling understands the objective. What is the objective? 15 years, I said calmly. We have negotiated a plea deal. You will plead guilty to corporate espionage, fraud, and conspiracy. You will serve 15 years in a federal penitentiary. 15 years, he screamed. Standing up, the guard behind him took a step forward. I can't do 15 years. I will be 55 when I get out. And I will be 53, I said, unbothered. And I will have forgotten you ever existed. 15 years is the perfect number. Julian, it is long enough to break you, but short enough that you have to eventually walk out and face a world that has left you behind. You will be old. You will be poor. You will have no skills, no contacts, and a felony record that will keep you from renting a decent apartment. You are a monster, he spat. I am a risk management director, I said. And I have managed this risk to zero. What about Elara? He asked, a flicker of malice in his eyes. Is she getting 15 years too? Elara is a different case, I said. Since she was the one moving the money, the IRS has taken a special interest in her. But that is not the worst part for her. You see, I did some digging into her real estate career in Nevada. I paused for effect. It turns out, selling houses that don't belong to you is a very serious crime in that state. They have extradited her. She was put on a transport plane this morning. She is going to a state prison in Nevada to face 30 counts of real estate fraud. She will be thousands of miles away from you. You will never see her again. You will never speak to her again. The empire you two built is just two concrete cells on opposite sides of the country. He sank back down onto the stool. He looked small. He looked finished. Why didn't you just leave me? He asked softly. 2 years ago, when you found out, why didn't you just divorce me and throw me out? Because you offended me. Julian. I stood up. I smoothed the fabric of my white suit. You offended my intelligence. You thought you could come into my house, drink my wine, sleep in my bed, and treat me like a fool. You thought I was weak because I loved you. You needed to learn that my love was the only thing protecting you from my intellect. I picked up my briefcase. Sign the papers. Julian, take the 15 years. It is the best offer you are going to get. If you go to trial, I will testify, and I promise you, I will make 15 years look like a vacation. He looked at the papers on the table. He looked at the pen. He picked it up with a shaking hand. He was broken. He was a hollow shell of a man who had flown too close to the sun and realized too late that the sun was a woman watching him burn. I turned to leave. I walked to the heavy steel door. Lavinia. I stopped. I didn't turn around. That phone, he said, his voice trembling. The burner phone. If I hadn't turned it on that night, would we still be together? I turned my head slightly. looking at him over my shoulder. "That is the irony, isn't it?" I said. "You bought that phone to destroy me. You bought it to coordinate the theft of my life. But in the end, it was the most expensive mistake you ever made." I walked back to the glass. I placed my hand against it, right over where his heart would be on the other side. "You should have used that phone to order a pizza. Julian, it would have been cheaper." I didn't wait for his response. I signaled the guard. The door buzzed open with a heavy metallic clank. I stepped out into the corridor, leaving the man who was once my husband trapped in the silence of his own failure. I walked down the long, linoleum hallway. My heels clicked a steady, rhythmic beat. Click, clack, click, clack. It sounded like a clock ticking. Or perhaps, it sounded like a gavel coming down. I walked out into the fresh air. I took a deep breath. The air tasted sweet. It tasted of ozone and victory. I checked my phone. A notification from my bank. The final transfer from the auction had cleared. I smiled. 15 years. I would have time to renovate the penthouse again. Maybe something lighter this time. Maybe something with no shadows. I got into the back of my car. "To the office, Ms. Greystone?" the driver asked. "No," I said, looking at the city skyline. "Take me to the airport. I have a business trip to Paris. I hear the architecture is beautiful this time of year." I closed my eyes. The board was clear. The king was captured. The queen was still standing. And the game was finally, truly over. The air at 50 stories up is thinner than it is on the ground. It is cleaner. It tastes less like exhaust fumes and desperation, and more like ozone and absolute, unadulterated power. I stood on the terrace of my new headquarters, looking down at the sprawling grid of Chicago. 6 months ago, I was a wife terrified of losing her husband. 6 months ago, I was an executive terrified of losing her job. Today, I am neither. I am an institution. Behind me, the glass doors of Greystone Intelligence stood open. The sign on the wall was milled from a single block of titanium, the letters backlit by a soft, icy blue light. I had left Aegis Prime 3 months after Julian's sentencing. The board had begged me to stay. They offered me the CEO position. They offered me stock options that would have set me up for 3 lifetimes. I declined them all with a polite, closed-lip smile. I had outgrown the need to protect corporate servers. I had discovered a far more lucrative market. I now fix people. Specifically, I fix the lives of the ultra-wealthy who have discovered, too late, that the people they sleep next to are liabilities. My fame had skyrocketed after the trial. The media painted me as the Iron Widow, a nickname I leaned into with relish. The narrative of how I dismantled an international espionage ring while navigating a divorce became a case study in business schools. Clients did not come to me for insurance anymore. They came to me for surgical removal of problems. I had a 6-month waiting list. My retainer fee was $500,000, non-refundable, and business was booming. I turned back toward the office. It was a stark contrast to the cluttered warmth of the life I used to share with Julian. The space was all white marble, chrome, and black leather. It was designed to intimidate. It was designed to say, "I see everything, and I judge everything." I walked to my desk, a floating slab of obsidian. Sitting on the corner was a small, cardboard box that had arrived via courier that morning. The label read, "Evidence Return Case Number 4490. I opened it. Inside, resting on a bed of yellow foam, was the phone, the real one, the device Julian had used to film his own destruction, the device I had hidden in my dress while the sprinklers rained down on us. I picked it up. It felt heavy, dense with the weight of betrayed memories. A normal woman might have turned it on. She might have scrolled through the old photos, looking for a glimpse of the man she thought she loved. She might have tortured herself with the what-ifs. I am not a normal woman. I walked over to the corner of the office where I kept a specialized piece of equipment, an industrial-grade hard drive crusher. It was a beast of a machine, designed to pulverize metal and silicon into dust. I dropped the phone into the slot. I did not hesitate. I did not say a prayer. I pressed the green button. The machine roared. There was a sickening crunch, the sound of glass shattering and metal twisting under thousands of pounds of pressure. It lasted for 10 seconds. Then, silence. I pulled out the tray. What was left of Julian's connection to the world was a pile of gray and black confetti. I dumped it into the trash can. "Goodbye, Julian," I said softly. My assistant, a sharp young man named Leo, who was terrified of me in the most productive way possible, knocked on the doorframe. "Ms. Greystone," he said. "The mail." He placed a silver tray on my desk. On it were 2 items that stood out among the invoices and invitations. One was a postcard thin, cheap cardstock, the kind you'd find in a commissary. The handwriting drifted, uneven and hard to read. I picked it up. "Lavinia," it said. "I had a very dark week, and I didn't handle it well. The staff stepped in, helped me steady myself, and now they're keeping a closer eye on me in a quieter place. I just wanted you to know. I wanted you to know that I'm facing what I did." "Is it enough yet, Jay?" I stared at the words. He wanted softness. He wanted that small, sharp pinch of doubt, as if his suffering could be traded for my sympathy. Even from behind a locked door, he was still trying to steer my feelings. I stood and crossed to the electric fireplace set into the wall. I folded the postcard once, neatly, and dropped it into the trash. "Not yet," I whispered. "Not for me." I went back to the tray. The second item was an envelope with a Nevada postmark. Elara. I used a letter opener to slice it open. It was a 3-page rant, scrawled in pencil. She blamed Julian. She blamed the system. She blamed me. But on the last page, the tone shifted to begging. They froze everything. "Lavinia, I have nothing. I can't even buy shampoo. I need money for my commissary account. Please, we are family. Blood is thicker than water. Just send me $500. You have millions now. You won't even miss it." I laughed. It was a dry sound, devoid of humor. Family. She remembered we were family now that she was wearing a beige uniform and eating prison loaf. I opened my desk drawer. I pulled out a book I had purchased specifically for this moment. It was a paperback titled Business Ethics for Beginners. I grabbed a sticky note and wrote a single line. Lesson 1: Don't steal from the person who signs the checks. I stuck the note to the cover. I tossed the book to Leo. "Send this to the Nevada State Correctional Facility," I said. "Register mail. I want to make sure she signs for it." "Yes, ma'am," Leo said, suppressing a smile. "And Ms. Greystone, the secure line is blinking. It is the new client." I sat down in my leather chair. I took a moment to center myself. This was the big one. I pressed the button. "This is Lavinia Greystone." "Ms. Greystone," a voice said. It was accented, elegant, and instantly recognizable. "This is the First Lady of—" I will not say the country. Discretion is the cornerstone of my new empire, but let us just say it is a nation known for its Alps and its banking secrecy. "Madam First Lady," I said smoothly, "how can I help you?" "I have heard you are the best," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I have reason to believe my husband is moving state funds into a private account in the Cayman Islands. He is planning to flee after the next election. I need to know for sure. And if he is, I need to ensure he leaves with nothing." I smiled. It was the same story, different players, higher stakes, but the same old story of greed and betrayal. Men who thought they were kings, forgetting that it is the queens who protect the board. "I can help you with that," I said. "But my methods are unconventional, and they are total." "Total is what I need," she replied. "I want him destroyed. Ms. Greystone, I want him to wish he had never met me." "Then we are going to get along very well," I said. "I will send over the contract. It is encrypted. Use the key I provided." I ended the call. I stood up and walked to the bar cart. I poured myself a glass of a rare vintage Bordeaux. It was a 1982, smooth and complex. I walked out onto the balcony again. The wind whipped at my skirt, but I did not feel the cold. I looked down at the city lights. They looked like diamonds scattered on black velvet. Somewhere down there, in the dark, people were lying to each other. They were cheating. They were stealing. They were making the mistake of thinking they could get away with it. They were my future clients. I thought about the penthouse. I had bought it back 2 weeks ago. I paid 20% over market value just to make the point that I could. I had gutted it. The kitchen where Julian cooked his lies was gone, replaced by a sleek, industrial catering space. The bedroom where I had slept next to a traitor was stripped to the studs. I was rebuilding it as a sanctuary for one. No guest room, no compromises, just space. I took a sip of the wine. It tasted of dark fruit and victory. I was alone. In the traditional sense, I was completely alone. No husband, no family. My parents were gone. My cousin was in a cell. My ex-husband was in a cage. But I did not feel lonely. I felt clarified. I had walked through the fire and burned away everything that was weak. I had shed the skin of the trusting wife and emerged as something harder, sharper, and infinitely more valuable. Life is a risk, I said to the wind, raising my glass to the skyline. And I am the manager. I turned my back on the city. I walked back into the office. My team was waiting in the conference room. Analysts, hackers, forensic accountants, my army. They looked up when I entered. They stopped talking. They waited for my command. I walked to the head of the table. I placed my wineglass down. I looked at the screen behind me. It displayed the seal of Greystone Intelligence. Below it, in green letters, the status of our network pulsed steadily. System secure, no unauthorized access. I smiled at my team. Let's get to work, I said. Thank you so much for listening to this story of betrayal and ultimate justice. If you enjoyed watching Lavinia turn the tables and build her empire, please leave a comment down below. Telling me where you are listening from, I would love to connect with you all. Don't forget to subscribe to Scarlet Revenge Stories. Like this video, and smash that hype button so we can share this story with even more people.